that kind of tees up a question I had for you quite well, Kyle, because you've made your entire name as being a guy who wasn't going to take any corporate money, right? We made the big seltzer joke, but you've never read an advertisement before Secular Talk, as far as I know. You've never taken a single conversation with a advertiser. You know, that inspired the Vanguard. We were like, taking conversations with advertisers. We'll do a Patreon. We'll do the amorphous ads that YouTube does, and we'll just play with the ball game straight, right? Other individuals have taken another path, right? And they still kind of claim this independent news credentials, these ND podcast credentials. You see it with like the PBD podcast, right? Those guys are taking all kinds of corporate money. Joe Rogan is taking $100 million from Spotify. Like it or not, that's not exactly independent media. And now, you know, you made the point that it's impossible to have a truly progressive news network, which means I have to follow up and ask you about the Young Turks network, because they kind of had that goal, right? They had this ambition to be a network that was truly independent, truly progressive, right? And they were able to be extremely successful for a time. We've often documented how they small dollars fundraised $400,000 to buy their new studio. Except over the last kind of 2 years, I feel like there's been such a backslide in people saying, I'm not going to take any corporate money. They've now renamed it the Polymarket Studio, you know, which is now placing bets on how many people are going to lose their homes in the Palisades fires and how many children are going to die in Gaza. And these are the people that they're advertising with at the home of new, progressive news. And of course, they're not the only ones, right? Tons of people are doing that. Jimmy Dore, when he started leaving the left, he immediately started hawking like gold and silver and a bunch of weird supplements on his show. It seems to be the more willing you are to cozy up with the powers that be, it just comes hand in hand with taking this money. So how do we compete with our own values intact and without, basically selling out all of our values along the way? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. How do we compete? Because we're going to be perpetually underfunded. I mean, the thing is, you really just got to lean into this whole, like, no, the only pure way of doing this business in this industry, the only pure way is small dollar donations from the ground up and the default ads on YouTube. That's it. I really think that this needs to be the line that everybody sort of leans into, because we're drawing a line in the sand in that respect and saying, you count as independent media if you meet these criteria. It's not independent media just because you're online. That's fake independent media, or as I call it, new corporate media. That's what, if you are giving in to the same malincentives and disincentives as mainstream media, what makes you think you're special? You're not special. You're subject to the same whims, right? So the only way to make it pure is like you guys have built it, like I've built it, like Breaking Points has built it, like Citations Needed, for example. They even go a step further than me. They say, we don't even have the default ads. We just do total small dollar donations. And I respect them for that, right? But we have to actually draw a line in the sand and say, this counts as independent media, and this other thing, whatever it is, you can call it whatever you want, but it's not independent media. It's just not. And I think a lot of people in this business, Cenk loves doing the show, or certainly at least he did. I don't know if he still does, but he has like business brain to some extent. He's always been like this. He's not just a host. Like, I view myself as just a host. I view myself as just a commentator. He views himself as like a host, a commentator, but also a businessman, right? And he's always been interested in the business side of what he's doing. And if that's the case, then yeah, you're always going to wander down some paths where it's questionable in terms of what kind of deal you're making, who you're taking the money from, etc. And that has consequences, right? Like the audience is going to react a certain way at a certain point. Do
you think the money came first, or the need for money came first, right? Because we've never seen behind the curtains at TYT. I've never met Cenk. He's never interacted with us. I can't really say on a personal level what his motivations are. All I can do is speculate, given that Gavin and I were viewers for a while. In your view, as somebody who was close to the network, or at least closer to the network than we are, when you look at the pivot, right, and you see, okay, wow, you're endorsing Rick Caruso, and you're saying that he would have done a better job at handling these wildfires, and you're saying, the asylum seekers are raising the rent prices in Los Angeles and all these kinds of things. Do you think that is a way to send up the bat signal to advertisers, hey, this is a safe place to do that? Or do you think it's kind of like a coincidence that they really had these authentic worldview changes, kind of more of a centrist worldview, not in my backyard worldview. And then as a result of that, advertisers felt safer. People like Polymarket felt safer. How do you think those, ends meet, right? Because for a long time, TYT kind of prided itself as being, above the fray in that sense.
So I think they mean what they say, and they started out with deals that would more sort of fit with what their stated values are. Like there's been a number of, I don't know the names off the top of my head, I never followed this stuff that closely, but there was a number of like companies that branded themselves as progressive that TYT would advertise for those particular progressive companies almost exclusively. At some point they were doing that, where it was like, here's this progressive bank or whatever it was, I forget the name of it. And like, I think it starts out like that. And I think the ideology that they're, espousing, I think they mean the things they say and they believe the things they say, but now it's just a wider range of advertisers that they feel like, hey, this sort of fits with our values, right? I mean, I'm sure, I think Cenk himself might bet on sports and things of that nature. So from his perspective, he feels like, well, what's the problem if I do a deal with like Polymarket, or if I do, I don't know if he has like FanDuel or any of those other ones, but you see this from podcasters all the time, right? They'll do FanDuel or DraftKings or whatever. And this is part of the problem, right? In this business is that I really think people feel like, wait, what's the problem? There's nothing wrong here. This is what you do if you're in media. And I don't know how to stress to people enough. Like if you are in news and politics in particular, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard. If you're some jackass comedian, okay, I get it. You're not claiming to be holier than thou. You're not claiming to be moral. You're not claiming like, hey, I need my values to be separate from these financial interests. But if you're in news and politics in particular, you need to remove any doubt in anybody's mind that there's some weird incentive structure going on there, where now you got to pull your punches because, you hear this thing from this advertiser or whatever. I mean, Crystal tells a story about when she was at The Hill, and of course, The Hill's a corporation, and the dude who owns the corporation would like contact Crystal and Sagar if they did a segment going after big pharma and be like, hey man, we got like Pfizer ad dollars here, and so you might want to like reel it in a little bit. And so,
isn't that how you got banned too?
I don't remember the reason I was banned. There's a whole backstory there about like he tried to get Crystal Kyle and friends pulled after like the first episode or something. There was like a whole bunch of craziness going on, but this is the dirtiness and this is the messiness when dealing with what's supposed to be independent media, new media, with politics and news and commentary. And this is why we keep coming back to it. You have to say, hey, here are my values. Here's the way we fund the show, and we don't deviate from this. And the reason why I think a lot of people hesitate to do that is because you're going to leave a lot of money on the table, right? If you get big numbers, I mean, I can make triple, quadruple what I do make if I decided to talk to advertisers, if I decided to do sponsorships and ad reads and talk to these corporations, etc. But you have to make a conscious choice and say, why am I doing what I'm doing here? I'm doing what I'm doing here for the message, for the news, for the information, for the commentary and the arguments. And if I taint that in the minds of my audience, well, then I'm going to lose trust in the long run, and nobody's going to want to fucking listen to me anyway. So as long as I can pay the bills, fuck the extra money. It's not about the money. It's not about the money. But I think a lot of people in this space, they do view it as a business. And then the other thing is, with TYT in particular, Cenk always had the mindset of like, we're going to have a network that is like, we want it to be as big as CNN or bigger than CNN. And this is where people come. And when you have that mindset, you hire 70 people, 75 people, whatever it is, that you're giving yourself a massive headache. That's a massive weight on your shoulders, because now you got to try to figure out how to bring in enough revenue to feed 75 people when we know what it's like to just even try to feed one person doing this. And that makes it so now you're scrambling for business. You're scrambling to find ways to make the numbers work, right? And it just makes it a much bigger headache than it needs to be, makes it much more difficult than it needs to be. I've always been an advocate of keeping things smaller, close to the chest, decentralized. You make all the decisions, because I need to be able to come out here and defend every decision I make in this industry, because we're supposed to hold ourselves to a higher standard. We're supposed to put the truth in the message above all else. And unfortunately, in this space, in the long run, a lot of shit happens, a lot of things get exposed, and people will flip on you in a second if they see you're going down the wrong path.
Right. Well, that's an interesting thing you bring up. And you talk about how, Cenk is going after this sponsorship money, but not just Cenk, commentators at large go after this advertiser money because they feel like if they don't, then they're leaving all that on the table. As you said, you're leaving quite a bit of money on the table by not having conversations with these people. Yet, I actually think from a purely business perspective, it's actually kind of worked out for you because guess what? Secular Talk is gaining subscribers on a daily basis. As we mentioned, the Young Turks has been losing them. They're being punished by their audience for this. And a lot of times you see it when someone starts a show with this principle and then later betrays that principle, they have to pay for it. There is consequences. Meanwhile, your channel has been rewarded. Your consistency has been rewarded. So that's really encouraging to Zach and I, in addition to what you said about, keeping things small, not trying to overextend from that perspective. I think that's really inspirational. And it kind of proves a lot of those establishment wisdom talking points incorrect. No, selling out isn't always the best move from a business strategy. It's not always going to be rewarded. And a lot of people that watch this content, they watch it for a reason. They're not just being programmed by the person they watch. They're not just going to agree with you because you change your mind and do an ideological 180. No, they're going to call you out and hold you accountable. With that being said, in relation to your channel's growth in specific, I was thinking a little bit about something that you talked a lot about back in the day. I feel like I haven't heard as much about it these days. And that's this whole notion of there being like two different YouTube algorithms, right? You used to talk a lot about how you felt that Secular Talk was on a lower algorithm, that it was somehow being suppressed by YouTube because of the fact that it's, more left-wing, anti-establishment content. But lately, as we talked about, Secular Talk has been doing really well. Sometimes I will get your videos auto-played, which isn't something that used to happen, as you would complain about quite frequently. So do you feel that there's been a change at YouTube? Do you feel like there's been some sort of a tweak to the algorithm? Or do you just think that your success as a channel is being rewarded by the algorithm and you've kind of been elevated into a new category that does get recommended more?
I think we're never going to know all the specifics. And we're never going to be able to peek beneath that hood because I'm sure that they're changing policies on a regular basis. And sometimes they make it worse. Sometimes they make it better. I've heard TJ Kirk talk about this, where in the past, this was even before my time, seemingly overnight, they decided we need to be more brand friendly. No more cursing. And it was just like overnight, like boom, you couldn't curse anymore. And if you did curse, you got totally destroyed by the algorithm. Your video wouldn't be pushed out at all. And they did this in an attempt to keep the ad dollars flowing. And throughout the history of YouTube, they've gone back and forth on like some key core questions like this. Like, hey, should we allow cursing? Should we not allow cursing? They've gone back and forth in terms of the length of the videos that they prioritize. There was a time when if it was shorter, it'd get pushed out more. Now it seems to be probably the opposite, that if it's longer, it gets pushed out more. So to answer your question, I really don't know. I do think certainly when Adpocalypse happened, they were very clear and open with the fact that, yeah, like sort of fuck all of political YouTube. You guys are giving us a headache. You're more trouble than you're worth. And like, we're not going to share your shit at all. And all of us got demonetized overnight. Never mind like the algorithm crushing us overnight. That happened. But then also there's been times where it's like, oh, wait, it looks like we're sort of getting a push at the moment. I mean, look at the way different channels work, right? Like take David Pakman, for example. He'll put out a video that'll get like 6,000 views. Then another one, it'll be like 12,000 views. Then he'll put one out there and it's like 650,000 views. And you're looking at it and you're like, what? How does that make sense? It's like, because you look at a channel like mine and it'll be relatively consistent. It's 60,000, 70,000, 65,000. Maybe one blows up and it's like 180 or whatever. But like it's relatively consistent. But his
channel had a good run at like 300,000, 400,000. Kyle, I'll give you your flowers. I keep tabs on you for a living. I happen to know you've been doing pretty good over there.
All right. Well, then you know better than I do. But I'll look at that and go, how is that possible? And the answer is, there's some black magic going on with what they've decided to do with the algorithm, what they push out, what they don't push out, etc. And there are times where we've been victims of that, and there are times where we've been beneficiaries of that, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I don't know. I'm at the point now where it's just, they're going to do whatever they're going to do as long as they don't completely and utterly snuff us out in the crib and destroy our spread completely. You just roll with the punches and try your best, and then hopefully you can put out content that's good enough that gets to enough people, gets to enough eyeballs where they're like, okay, you know what? We'll subscribe, we'll keep watching, etc.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there.